Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you all, our audience and our distinguished speakers. My name is Mátyás Vajda, and I'm a lead researcher at Danube Institute, primarily specializing in fossil fuels. And it is a great honor to moderate this panel titled Green Promises, Grey Realities, the EU's Energy Paradox. But before we begin, I would like to briefly clarify something. Today's session is about music, or more likely about harmony or resonance. From the perspective of physics, music is nothing more than a system of vibrations interacting in resonance. Of course, it is far more than that. For example, let's take orchestral music. It emerges when multiple musicians, each with their own instrument, their own role or experience, they operate within the same underlying rhythm. True resonance happens when musicians do not merely follow the structure intellectually, but become part of the same momentum. They may approach the music differently, but they remain aligned with the same structure of reality. Because music does not come from individual brilliance. It comes from coherence. Coexistence in order, in common resonance. Now, to those who may be wondering whether you have entered the wrong room or the wrong panel discussion, please don't leave, because energy systems function in much the same way. An energy system is not defined by one technology alone, not by renewables, not just gas, not just nuclear, but by how these elements operate together, their balance, the timing, and the structural coherence. And this is where the European energy paradox begins. While the political rhythm may suggest rapid transformation, the physical system continues to operate according to its own tempo and shaped by infrastructure, geography, and long investment cycles. So today we will talk about, of course, energy and the paradoxical processes that reveal the reality behind EU's political ambition, and perhaps whether the system still resonates with itself. We are honored to have four distinguished experts with us today. Allow me to introduce the ensemble, the band, the orchestra here, who will give today's concert. On the theoretical piano, Bernadett Mátyás, senior energy economist and analyst. On the precise and strategic violin, we have Liliana Smiech, but she's also the Director General for International Affairs at Ludovika University of Public Service. Providing the structural foundation, the double bass that holds the system together with his unmatched experience, Furfari, Professor of Energy Geopolitics and former senior official at DG Ener and at the European Commission. And bringing analytical solo clarity to the rhythm, Dayaratna, Vice President at the Center for Statistical Modeling and Scientific Analysis in Policy and Senior Research Fellow in Energy and Climate Policy at Advancing American Freedom. So please, panelists, I would like to ask the panelists to occupy the seats. It's on, yeah. So as a warm-up, I would like to pose a question to all of you, firstly. Since 2019, the European Union has fundamentally redefined the direction and ambition of its energy policy in pursuit of decarbonization, resilience, and of course the strategic autonomy. Looking at the developments of this period and their presented consequences, what is the one area where the EU has demonstrated genuine strategic foresight, or let's say strength? And what is the one area where it may have made its most consequential misjudgment for its economic competitiveness or geopolitical position? So I would like to firstly ask Bernadett, please.
Good evening. I believe the EU showed a genuine strategic foresight with the introduction of the Repower EU framework. We were able to react with an incredible agility to diversify our sources when the crisis hit. However, data shows, in my recent research published in Statistical Review, the journal of the Hungarian Statistical Office, that there was a major misjudgment regarding the structural resilience of the energy market. When the crisis hit in 2021, we saw a 180-degree reversal in risk-adjusted returns. While from 2010 to 2020, the renewables dominated the peace regime, in 2021, when the crisis hit, traditional energy became once again the ultimate safe haven for investors. So what I'm trying to say here is that green goals, I think, cannot ignore the hard reality of market stability. Thank you.
Thank you. Liliana, please.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. Well, if you would ask me what went well and what went wrong, I'm Polish, so I would usually start with the bad things. But let me now reverse and start with a good, let's say, answer of the European Union. I believe what was done in the right way was actually realizing or noticing that there are certain strategic dependencies. I think that was the point where we made a good judgment. Later on, probably the policies that were introduced were not perfect, but the leaders realized that something is wrong, and probably we should diversify in the longer term. On the other hand, if you would ask me to tell you one thing that went wrong, that would be probably a little bit more difficult. But I would say the core, let's say, misjudgment that happened was probably replacing the visible dependencies with those that are less visible. So we didn't actually replace any dependency. And another thing that I should add, because it's, I think, connected also to the very first point, is unfortunately forgetting about the different realities and asymmetries between the member states of the European Union. So, in short, I would say these are the two things: let's say the successes or correct judgments, and these things that went not perfectly.
Thank you, Liliana. Professor?
I think that we have to look back to the situation of the past before looking at today. For nearly 70 years, we have provided cheap and abundant energy to all the citizens and to all industry. The EU has been created for that, to deliver energy, to deliver abundant energy. at the beginning with the Coal Treaty and then with the Euratom Treaty. And for nearly all the years that I've worked in the Commission, that was the aim, to have abundant energy for the industry in order to be competitive globally and in order to bring prosperity to the people. And if we look back at the situation in the 50s and today, we can be proud of what we have done. But at that time, the aim was just energy. Energy. No, the aim is no more energy, it's climate. And you reverse the priority. And if the aim is climate or climate governance, you forget about energy. And I would like to come back at the end on that, because we need to deal with the security of supply. Not only Hungary with the problem that you have today, but every member state in Europe needs to deal with its own security of supply. And the aim should be to deliver the energy and not to limit the CO2 emissions. This is what has been wrong, and sadly, it continues to be wrong in Brussels, Strasbourg.
Thank you, Professor. Now, Kevin, please.
Firstly, thank you for having us. I'll divide this into exactly the two components. Firstly, the strategic foresight and strength. The European Union sharply reduced its dependence on Russian gas after 2022. Before the invasion, Russia supplied roughly 40 to 45% of European Union natural gas imports, making it the dominant external supplier. By 2024 to 2025, that share had fallen to under 20%, replaced primarily by LNG imports, especially from the United States, alongside increased Norwegian flows, demand reduction, and renewable expansion. Now, this restructuring significantly reduced Europe's vulnerability to energy coercion politically. Firstly, it restored strategic credibility. By unwinding a decades-long relationship within just 2 years, the EU demonstrated that security commitments would not be subordinated to energy dependence. Secondly, it reduced leverage. Russia's ability to exert direct pressure through pipeline supply manipulation was materially diminished. Thirdly, institutionalized energy security in some respects. Mandatory gas targets, accelerated LNG terminals, and cross-border coordination strengthened the European Union's capacity to respond collectively to supply shocks. And fourthly, it fundamentally transformed the relationship by fostering a transformation toward transatlantic energy interdependence. The United States became a major LNG supplier, tightening geopolitical alignment between the European Union and the United States in energy and security matters. Now for the misjudgment. Here's the thing. The European Union advanced highly ambitious decarbonization targets, including climate neutrality by mid-century. Now, although the European Union exceeded its 2020 emissions target, meeting 2030 and 2040 goals will require significant acceleration in terms of deployment speed. The question is whether the system will actually be able to handle this. And policy has emphasized emissions targets, but what's largely been missing from the conversation is access to affordable, reliable, and abundant energy. And the criticisms of doing so and the focus on decarbonization is due to climate change. But regarding climate change, there remains substantial uncertainty about long-term projections in terms of the climate as well as damages. Climate projections are model-based, and it's very dangerous for lawmakers to focus on estimates that come from particular models because there is vast uncertainty with them. Now, here's the thing. Even if you assume the worst-case scenarios about the climate sensitivity, even if the European Union were to completely decarbonize starting today, there would be less than 0.14 degrees Celsius temperature mitigation by the end of the century. And this is assuming overly sensitive assumptions about the climate and using the IPCC's own models. So even under standard assumptions, worst-case assumptions, I should say, complete elimination of EU emissions won't meaningfully reduce global temperatures. But people may disagree with the extent of climate change or what the extent is. But the bottom line is all of these policies need to be predicated on ensuring abundant, affordable, and reliable energy for years to come, especially with the proliferation of AI and data centers going forward.
Thank you, Kevin. So, ambition versus system constraints. Now, I would like to pose the first question again to Mr. Dayaratna and to the professor. Looking at the broader geopolitical and strategical picture, the global energy system is being rapidly reshaped by, just to mention some of them, a terrible war in our neighborhood. China is expanding influence, the United States redefining the global energy, the order, the industrial dynamics, and of course we had the situation in Venezuela. So in this environment, is the European Union acting as a strategic architect of its own energy future, or primarily adapting to the conditions shaped by others? First, I would like to Kevin to start.
Okay, great question. So the European Union demonstrated architectural strength in reducing dependence on Russian gas and coordinating collective action. However, the reconfigured supply mix now reflects significant adaptation to external suppliers, particularly the United States LNG and Norwegian pipeline gas, illustrating that the current European trajectory is shaped by the developments in global markets and producer capacities as much as by internal EU policy choices. At the same time, as I was alluding to earlier, electricity demand is expected to rise substantially due to AI data centers, electrification, and industrial transformation. Energy policy is being increasingly tied to industrial policy. So regardless, the long-term policy for the EU is decarbonization and net zero by the middle of the century. Now, coming from the United States, if you look at the United States in contrast, especially in the Trump administration, what the Trump administration is doing is ensuring a greater focus on energy abundance, access to affordable and reliable energy, expanding domestic oil and gas production, increasing LNG exports, expanding nuclear technologies, and prioritizing reliability and cost containment, alongside emissions reductions, which have been happening naturally for quite some time. From a policy perspective, President Trump recently vacated the endangerment finding in the US, which is predicated on the assumption that CO2 is a pollutant and therefore needs to be regulated under federal law. I have a paper on the Advancing American Freedom website that was recently published, a policy memo that goes into the scientific case for doing so. These deferring approaches reflect different judgments about sequencing. The United States strategy assumes abundant domestic energy strengthens economic resilience and geopolitical leverage, even as technological innovation continues to reduce emissions. Now, from a broader perspective, climate mitigation operates at a global scale. The EU represents a very small fraction of global emissions, so the direct temperature impact, as I was alluding to earlier, of unilateral decarbonization is fundamentally limited, around 1/10 of 1 degree Celsius. So the strategic question for Europe is whether its current pathway will actually preserve sufficient energy abundance going forward, especially to compete in a world of rising electricity demand driven by the rise in AI. Taken together, the EU appears increasingly reactive to external policy pressures and global market dynamics, rather than fully anchoring its strategy in long-term energy abundance and system resilience.
Thank you, Kevin. Professor, how do you see it as a former insider?
For decades, the EU was the center of the world with the USA. And therefore, the EU was convinced that what we are doing in Brussels or Strasbourg will shape the world. And it's why, for nearly 30 years now, the EU has always said we want to be the leader in innovation, in technology, and climate governance. The problem is that to whom we speak with that, they need growth. We do not need so much growth in Europe, or at least some politicians believe that we don't need so much growth, but the rest of the world need growth. Take Africa. They are using 11 times less electricity than a European. They cannot continue like that. They badly need electricity. And of course, everybody talk about China, but we should talk more about India, about Philippines, about Indonesia, and all the rest of the countries. They need growth. Growth is only possible if you work. If you don't work, there is no growth. And the definition of work in physics is energy. Work is energy. The measurement is in joule. So the rest of the world wants joule. And to have joule, you need to use energy. What type of energy? All type of energy, including renewable, including nuclear. But 87%, please, 87% of the energy in the world is fossil fuel. So if you want to have growth, you need to work, and to work you need to have fossil fuel. It's why, despite all the 30 COP that we had until now, the CO2 emissions have increased by 66%. It's not serious to say that we need to continue. 30 COP, 66% of increase. Of course, the EU have it decreased by 35% for reasons that we can explain, but not because we are green, but for other reasons. So that means that we are isolated in the world. That's our problem. We are isolated. We were isolated, but now with the US administration, even more. When you have Mr. Rubio in Munich last week say that the climate cult have destroyed our economy, the message is clear, no? The climate cult have destroyed our economy. You say our economy because it was also the case in USA before Mr. Biden, before Mr. Trump. And last week in Paris at the IEA ministerial meeting, Mr. Chris Wright, the Secretary of State for Energy of USA, say clearly, we are mad to continue to deal with decarbonization. Decarbonization will destroy our economy. But nobody listened in Brussels. Nobody listened in Strasbourg. Their vision is still decarbonization. And you see the result of the situation. The economic situation in the EU is a disaster. Chemical companies are leaving Germany, leaving Belgium, leaving all the countries to go in India. The petrochemical is in danger. The aluminium industry is escaping. Automotive industry is destroyed. Just because of this willingness of decarbonization that the rest of the world ignore. Please remember, 66% of increase of CO2 emissions since we are saying that we want to reduce.
Thank you. So now let's focus more on a smaller scale, particularly to Central and Eastern Europe. So Europe has been expected to move away from fossil fuels, particularly oil and gas, later, of course, Russian-originated energy carriers, but now this is not what we are looking for here, so we'll discuss it later. So there has been a diversification which was accelerated, and the Russian imports have declined. These fuels also, at least it seems that these fuels still remain central to economic stability and the security of supply. So enabling the realistic transition. Are we seeing a growing gap between political ambition and physical reality of the energy system, where oil and natural gas remain indispensable? Liliana, could I ask you to address this from the perspective of oil, please?
Sure. For sure. I'm sorry, I had to.
Sure.
Yeah, surely. I mean, if we look at for example, the one of the latest energy outlooks that was published last year by the International Energy Agency, if we look at the current policy scenario, I'm not talking about the net zero one because that's more idealistic, but if we look at the current policy scenario, and it was being prepared exactly also during the President Trump's administration, we can clearly see that demand for oil will be growing minimum until 2050. And
You mean in the Central and Eastern?
No, I'm talking from the world.
Globally.
Global perspective. But oil, especially in Central Eastern Europe, is crucial. First of all, for the transportation sector. Second of all, for the industry sector, but also for the household sector. So, of course, we can have big ambitions, but the reality, I believe, will unfortunately or fortunately bring us back to the cold, harsh ground, because we will be simply not able to implement the policies that we projected in our heads. I mean, I'm not a politician, but the leaders, especially in Brussels, they tend they tend to promise a lot. I can also promise and tell you that by tomorrow I will lose 20 kilos.
You can do that.
Well, but first of all, we don't take into consideration health results of such a statement, and it's simply not possible. And I feel like we have similar assessments and plans that are coming to us from Brussels, and that's exactly what I said in the very beginning. We are 27 different countries, and the realities of Central Eastern Europe are totally different than the realities of the Western one. All of the routes in the past were going from the east to west. Nothing was done from north to south. Like we are in a different situation. Case of Poland is still more than 60% of our energy mix is coming from coal. Then how do we want to decarbonize within a week? I think it is important to diversify. Of course, the differences between diversifying the suppliers and the actual routes, because that's also another discussion. But we cannot simply do it. I believe that the governments of all of the countries in the Central Eastern Europe, they are doing everything to supply their citizens with affordable and reliable energy, but you cannot do it immediately, and you cannot replace stable energy resources with something that we don't really have.
Thank you, Liliana. Now, the perspective of gas, please, Bernadett.
Yeah, in the region in the Central and Eastern European region, natural gas isn't just a simple fuel choice. It's our infrastructural backbone, especially in the chemistry sector. Our current industrial base is built on its availability. So my concern here is that the current trajectory might create a dangerous political structural gap between the political ambition and systemic reality. The point here is that gas is a technological necessity, a bridge fuel for this region that we cannot simply switch off overnight without risking deindustrialization. So to prevent deindustrialization, I think we should keep up with our diversification efforts via the vertical corridors to ensure security. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let us now turn to the institutional dimension, the internal coherence of EU energy policy making. So, Professor, based on your experience, I think you worked like 36 years. Yeah, experience. So that's something. So this experience, both inside and outside of the European Commission. So how do you assess the institutional competence, or let's say strategic realism, from the perspective of policy making?
Before the Lisbon Treaty, there was no EU common policy. There was the coal with the ECAC Treaty, the common market of coal. There was the Euratom, but there was not a common policy on energy. Just an anecdote. France didn't want to have that. Mr. Mitterrand said, I do not want that officials in Brussels close nuclear power plant in France. So simple. Because, of course, there is so much opposition to nuclear that France say, no, if we put the Commission on control, they will destroy our nuclear industry. And indeed, with the Lisbon Treaty, it happens. It happens because we decide that the policy on energy policy and also environment policy, it should be a shared competence between the Union and the member state. That means it's not the Commission which decides the EU policy. Please remember that. It's not the Commission. It is the Commission with the EU, with the member states, sorry. And everything which is going bad on energy policy is not only the fault of the Commission. It's also because of member states have accepted. Member states have accepted the Green Deal. Member states have accepted decarbonization. Member states have accepted all the directives which are destroying our economy. So the Commission proposed, but the decision is the Parliament and mainly the member state. So I think that if we need to be realistic, or we continue like that to destroy with ideology, or maybe we should return to before the Lisbon Treaty. What is surprising me is that there is more and more people openly saying that in Brussels or Strasbourg. I was yesterday in the European Parliament with an Italian MEP, and he was saying that. We cannot continue with the Lisbon Treaty when we forbidden member states to decide their own security of supply. Because at the end, it's always that. Huh? We need energy. We need security of supply. Who better know how to control the security of supply if not the country? What you have for time being in the difficulty that you have in Hungary, what it is? You are not free to decide what to do with your security of supply. And I think that if we do not accept that the energy is the cornerstone of our liberty, we will have more and more problems. So I think that it was nice, it was enthusiastic to have common things, and we need to have common things. For example, the network of the gas is fantastic. We need to have a lot of things, no problem. We need, but not everything decided on the shoulder of the member state. So this has to change. It takes time, of course. Don't believe that it will be tomorrow, but it will change. It's not possible to continue.
Thank you so much. Kevin, how internally consistent is the European Union's current climate and energy policy framework? I mean the targets, the timelines, and of course the implementation.
Okay. Great question. So let's first answer this question very specifically and then take a broader perspective on this. So if you actually look at the actual numbers, the target in 2020 with respect to 1990 levels was 20% decarbonization. And actually, what was achieved was substantially larger than this. But in 2030, the target is 55%. 2040, 90%. And 2050, net zero. So that's just the goals out there. Now, let's think about the practicality of this. So clearly, with that data, you could see the required pace of emissions needs to accelerate sharply as we go into the next decade. Meeting the 2030 and 2040 goals implies annual decarbonization rates several times faster than the EU's historical average, sustained across power, industry, transport, and buildings simultaneously, a scale and speed not previously maintained across any large advanced economy, without, of course, structural disruption. So while renewable deployment has accelerated, installed nameplate capacity, which is a term, the maximum related output of generation assets, does not automatically translate into dependable system capacity. As renewable penetration rises, the binding constraints shift toward transmission and distribution expansion. Permitting timelines, interconnection capacity, storage, and firm low-carbon supply. Long-run success depends less on adding gigawatts and more on whether grid infrastructure and system flexibility scale fast enough to maintain reliability and affordability. And moreover, technology timelines differ across sectors. Wind and solar have expanded as a result of substantial policy support, namely subsidies, and preferential integration into the electricity markets. But as their penetration deepens, system-level costs related to reliability, storage, and grid reinforcement become increasingly consequential. On the other hand, hard-to-abate sectors like high-temperature industry, chemical feedstocks, aviation, and shipping, among others, will rely on technologies such as hydrogen, e-fuels, carbon capture, and long-duration storage, which might technically be feasible, but as a matter of practicality, they're not ready for prime time in large-scale use. So this is going to create a tension between policy timelines and the commercial maturity of these system-wide so-called least-cost solutions that would actually allow for decarbonization. Now, let's take a step back. Think about the big picture. Energy abundance underpins economic competitiveness. If decarbonization raises costs or weakens reliability, growth and political durability will both suffer. The data is clear. Countries with higher per capita energy consumption consistently perform better on income, productivity, and health-related outcomes. Energy isn't just a luxury output, or input, I should say. It is foundational and fundamentally important for human flourishing. Because climate operates at a global scale, as I was alluding to earlier, the temperature impact of unilateral EU decarbonization is highly limited. It's not going to do anything in terms of global temperature reductions. And furthermore, it actually, if those of you, well, not you, but in general, for those concerned about climate change, these types of reductions may actually result in what's called carbon leakage, or shifts elsewhere, where more CO2 might get emitted when the industrial production shifts elsewhere in the globe. So, and this thereby will ultimately erode parts of the European industrial base. So, in system terms, long-run success, the EU framework depends on maintaining an abundant, reliable, and affordable energy system. If grid expansion, firm low carbon supply, and system flexibility don't scale fast enough, the tension between climate ambition and economic resilience could ultimately undermine both.
Thank you, Kevin. So we've mentioned before the Repower EU and the sanctions. I'm turning to Liliana. Yeah, after, of course, the water, yeah. So in your assessment, can these measures be considered successful so far? I mean, if yes, in what specific dimensions? And if not, where do we have the main limitations, or let's say market trade-offs?
Well, you know, it depends. How do we look at the question that you have just asked me? If we look from the general, let's say, perspective, is the war in Ukraine ongoing? Yes. So the question is it working? No, with this regards. If we look at the diversification in the EU, then yes. I mean, I think it's always good to, you know, to diversify. So, so from this perspective, I think that's maybe that can be perceived by certain member states of the European Union as a success. But you know, there's always a question: are we actually being honest about what's happening? For example, with regards to the oil imports to the European Union. Of course, since 2022, we have a ban on the direct imports of crude oil from Russia to the European Union, with exemptions of the Druzhba pipeline, which unfortunately is not happening right now. But then, if we look, for example, at the data, which countries are using Russian oil in their refineries, on the first place you have India. And then if you look at the countries that are actually sending us the oil or the byproducts to the European Union, India is one of the leaders of it. Same with Turkey. You know, so the question is whether we are buying it directly for a lower price or whether we are paying more via intermediaries. And it's not only the case of oil, but it's also the case of other resources. So I would not, you know, perceive Repower EU as a huge success. Of course, it always depends how you will present the data and what would be the actual question. But the war is ongoing. So if the goal of the sanction is to stop it, then no, it's not working. If the goal is to diversify, then surely I think if we look at the separate individual member states, sure, then we can perceive it as a certain success.
Thank you, Liliana. So, Bernadett, what role do energy availability, affordability, and also supply structure play in Hungary's economic competitiveness within the European context?
Hungary is positioning itself as a global hub for energy-intensive industries, especially in EV supply chain and battery production. To make this strategy work, energy affordability and a stable supply structure are needed for FDI attraction. My analysis shows a high level of tail dependence when market stress hits, meaning that during a crisis, everything becomes volatile. So to stay competitive, we cannot rely on a single intermittent source alone. We need a balanced portfolio. Massive solar capacity, yes, but backed by stable baseload power and the flexibility that only gas can currently provide.
Thank you. So now let's turn to the future. And of course the technological pathways which are ahead. So from your respective perspective, Mr. Furfari, which of these technological directions appear to be the most viable and strategically sound, and which critical technologies or pathways do you believe may be receiving insufficient attention for Europe's competitiveness or energy security?
One of the big mistakes of energy policy is to believe that everything is emerged because of climate change. This is false. We are dealing with energy policy since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, but mainly since 1974, with the first oil shock created by OPEC, the Arab countries of OPEC. There it was a tremendous shock, repeated in 1979. And all the OECD countries start to react on that. Particularly the European Commission start to create programs. It's why I enter into the EU, in the Commission, to develop programs for alternative energies. So it's now 51 years that we are working on alternative energies. And what is the situation after 51 years? A little bit more windmill and a little bit more solar panel. But this is old technology. This is not a new technology. Huh? There is no new technologies indeed. The problem is that people believe that tomorrow we'll discover a new technology, an innovation. That means that for 50 years, engineers were stupid. 50 years of research, and we are in this situation. And suddenly we will find a new solution? Come on, there is no new solution. The only solution is to continue what we had in the past. And what we had in the past? Oil. And thank you for mentioning oil, because this is a taboo word in Brussels. Huh? Nobody mentioned oil in Brussels.
Oil and gas, oil and gas.
Nobody mentioned the most important energy in the EU. 43% of the primary energy is oil, but it's a taboo. We cannot say that. Then we have a strong opposition to nuclear energy, which has been invented in the 50s And we are lucky, also Hungary and many countries, about 12 member states have nuclear power plant, but there is still an opposition.
Because it works too well.
Mainly Germany, but also, if you want, I can give you details. Inside the Commission, there is a strong opposition to nuclear energy, inside the top level of the Commission. And what do they want? To repeat more wind and more solar. So I think that we need to be serious about that. There is no single bullet. Well, there is another surprise. Nuclear was a big surprise, and the second one is shale oil and shale gas. This is changing the energy geopolitics. If you want, we can discuss about that. But in the EU, we refuse even to know if we have shale oil or shale gas. Even the prospection is prohibited. So what new technology are you looking? Heat pump, it's very old. I don't know what else there is as a new technology. There is no new technology. Everything is old. But we have solution. It's not because it's old that we do not have solution. We have solution. We have a lot of gas around the EU. All the EU is surrounded of gas. So there is no problem of supply of gas, oil also. So I think that the solutions are there. It's just a political mistake to say that we need to find new solutions.
Thank you, Professor. So most viable and strategically sound solutions, Bernadett, and insufficient attention, please.
I am a strong advocate for technological neutrality. I say we shouldn't pick winners yet. The EU is mainly focused, as you said, on wind and solar. But my research shows that during crises, when the market is stressed, their correlation tend to drop significantly. So I'd say we're missing two pieces of the puzzle here. One is large-scale storage. Without storage, energy transition is just physically impossible. And second, geothermal energy, especially here in Hungary, in the Pannonian Basin. It's here, it's local, it's stable. It's a baseload resource, and I think we should give it much more attention.
Thank you so much. In the shorter term, fossil fuels will remain essential to energy security and economic stability. But over a longer term, over the next 40 or 50 years, many scenarios assume a near complete transition away from them. So, I mean, how realistic is this? Are the current trends truly pointing to this direction? Liliana, please.
I forgot to take my glass bowl with me for this panel discussion. No, I don't think they are realistic. I mean, of course, there are certain scenarios that are presented by many different consultancy companies that will show us that the net zero is possible. Well,
possible, yeah.
Yes.
But that's it.
If we exactly, that's one. I mean, not taking into consideration current policies and current economic, industrial capabilities. So we need to, I think, differentiate the normative scenarios like this one and the ones that are policy based. But I'm pretty sure Kevin will tell us maybe more about it. But looking at the current policy scenario, it's simply not possible. And I mean, we can have big ambitions. Why not? But the reality is totally different. So I don't think it's possible. And maybe we should finally realize, be conscious and brave enough to say that the policies that were introduced in 2019 and later on by the president of the European Commission are simply wrong, and they have no reality backbone.
Thank you. So now, Kevin, I would like to asked to answer the question briefly.
Okay. So let's start out with this. Any long-term discussion, I know, we were thinking about the next 40 to 50 years, but any long-term discussion needs to begin with a recognition that fossil fuels have been fundamentally foundational to modern prosperity. They have enabled industrialization, longer life expectancy, mobility, food security, and unprecedented global reductions in poverty. Fossil fuels are not merely legacy fuels. They are dense, reliable, and deeply integrated into modern economic systems. It's not practical to just throw them out the window for something else. And I know that lawmakers are seeking to phase them out, or quote unquote phase them out. But the policy question really isn't about moral condemnation or endorsement, but how and at what pace can energy systems evolve into other potential forms of energy. So a full structural shift, I was getting into this earlier in the talk, a full structural shift away from fossil fuels would require unprecedented scaling of grids, storage, and firm low-carbon capacity. Just think about it as a thought experiment. So complete elimination is especially challenging, if not impossible, where hydrocarbons serve as feedstocks, such as in petrochemicals and fertilizers, and in high energy density uses, such as aviation and shipping and so forth. Substitution pathways exist. No, that's definitely true. But are they actually viable at large-scale, cost-competitive deployment levels? The answer is, at this point, definitely not. So this is the answer to the question. As a matter of practicality, natural gas is likely to remain as peak or backup fuel unless this long-duration storage of these alternative forms of energy becomes practical. But I'm very skeptical that that's going to happen. I'm just answering the question agnostically. Oil demand may decline. I know, we've heard otherwise. Globally, the planet is heavily dependent on the use of oil. But one can argue that through electrification of the automobile industry, demand may decline in some capacities. But then think about the persistent uses in terms of aviation, shipping, petrochemicals, heavy machinery, and defense, where energy density, material feedstock requirements, infrastructure constraints really limit rapid substitution. I mean, when you really think about it, it's not practical. So, in my mind, the most realistic outcome isn't total elimination, but rather diversification across all forms of energy, including nuclear and continued use of hydrocarbons, with efficiency improvements. And really, the most optimal solution is an all-of-the-above energy solution, where all forms of energy can compete and the best forms can win. And this should occur without subsidies in the market, where the best forms of energy can win and dominate and proliferate. And these are going to differ in different areas and regions.
Thank you, Kevin. So we have arrived to the closing round. I would like to ask all of you one question, and I would like to ask you to respond briefly, very briefly, because we are very short on time. So can the European Union remain economically competitive on its current trajectory? Or what is, please name one single most important breakthrough that is needed to secure its future. So please identify only one and please keep it short. Kevin, please.
So I'll start out with this, and I'll keep it as short as possible. Lawmakers need to understand three words: affordable, reliable energy. So that's really the bottom line here. Economic competitiveness depends on abundant, reliable, and affordable energy. In advanced manufacturing, AI, and digital infrastructure, electricity cost and system stability are divisive. So the single most critical breakthrough is scalable, low-cost, firm power, the ability to deliver stable 24/7 electricity at a competitive cost. Without affordability and reliability, long-term competitiveness is structurally at risk. And the way to do this is for lawmakers to understand, to not worry about decarbonization requirements, but rather focus on letting energy compete on a level playing field and letting it be a true free market.
Thank you. Liliana?
You said affordable and reliable energy. I would also add predictable, especially for the European manufacturing. So if we can have affordable, reliable, predictable energy, then maybe we can think about the EU competitiveness. But for now, it's under question. Though we can see that there are some issues with the EU ETS system, so maybe in the near future we can see some breakthrough, especially in it, because actually this and other, of course, policies are unfortunately killing our industries.
Thank you, Liliana. Bernadett, please.
To remain competitive, the EU must shift from the ideology-based policy to strategic realism. So if you ask me for the single most critical breakthrough, I would say it's scalable storage and grid modernization. We need a unified EU framework that makes storage economically viable. Once we solve the storage problem, renewable energy stops being a volatility risk and becomes a true economic stabilizer. And I think this is the only way to protect our industry.
Thank you. And the double base, please, Mr. Furfari.
Diversification. In October 2000, the European Commission published a green paper on the security of supply of energy. I was in charge of communication on that, so I remember perfectly that we were saying that we need 3 diversification. First of all, diversification of energy sources. That means no taboo. We need everything. Yes, we need renewable, but we need coal and nuclear, oil and gas. We need all energies. Second diversification, not to depend too much on one supplier. Common sense. Not depend too much of the OPEC for the oil, or not depend too much of Russia for gas. Common sense. And the third diversification is diversification of the route. How you bring energy outside from to inside. Not everything passing by Ukraine. It was clearly said, not all renewable, not all Russia, and not all Ukraine. What have done Germany? Exactly the reverse. And because we have created a single market, not only Germany has been punished, all Europeans have been punished, because we refuse the common sense of diversification. So the future is again the same, diversification. We are in a world where there's plenty of oil and gas and coal and uranium. So diversification is the solution. And not to have a Manichaeism vision to say, like in France, it's only nuclear. I am in favor of nuclear, but France is exaggerating. But also the EU is exaggerating, 100% renewable. It's ridiculous.
Thank you. So systems do not run on promises or something like that, it seems to me. So they run on structure and consistency, and it must be carefully engineered. So yeah, we need resonance and not just promises. So thank you for listening to this unconventional concert, and thank you for the band here. So now we will now open the floor to the questions. We are short on time, so please try to keep it short, you as well. Any questions? Back there. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Peter Sitash. I'm a Deputy Director of Research at the Danube Institute, and I would like to ask Liliana, as a Polish living in Hungary, how do you see currently the situation of the V4, and do you see any chance that in a Visegrad format there will be in the near future, maybe after the elections in Poland, any kind of energy diversification or any kind of help on a micro level to each other? Thank you.
Please.
Well, on the V4 format, I don't really see much, because energy, I wouldn't say is like one of the cores of the V4 cooperation per se. But surely, I hope that the cooperation within the V4 will be stronger in the future. Let's wait for the elections, indeed. So I would rather focus maybe on different kind of formats, these that are more dedicated to the energy cooperation. Maybe the 3Cs initiative could work as some kind of a facilitator of the better interconnectors in the region. I think V4 is not the best format for it, but there are other regionals. Formats that could serve as a good backbone for it, and hopefully in the future it will be stronger and stronger.
Yeah, thank you. So it was addressed to you, but also you can react on that now. That's it. Thank you, Liliana. Thank you. Please, here in the second line. Please keep it short, please.
Yeah, very short. So my question is to emphasize the Germany role. So I don't know if I feel like the EU is not united, but following the Germany ecologist policies behind about the nuclearization abandoning and from 30 years rule. And so that's my question. Isn't we didn't try to follow too much what Germany wanted to impose ideologically? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You should know, I suppose that you know that the leader of the EU is Germany. It's a fact. Politically, economically, in Strasbourg, the larger country is Germany. Nothing happens without Germany in the European Parliament. And Germany have decided to have an energy vendor. All parties. It's not just the ecologists. Everybody. Mrs. Merkel was in favor of energy vendor. Mr. Merz is in favor of energy vendor. So Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen, German, from the same parties, is in favor of energy vendor. So we have been all obliged to follow that, and it's why I was saying that the member states are culprit. You know, if all the member states are against Germany, Germany cannot impose its vision. So the problem is that mainly France, but also the other, have imposed the energy vendor to the EU. So it's ideology, of course. It's just that, ideology.
Thank you, Professor. You had your answers, right? Yeah, thank you so much. So I would like to thank our distinguished guests, distinguished speakers, musicians, as you like it. Thank you all for being here. And of course, we are... okay, please. Sorry. Please.
My name is László Szarka. I'm the chairman of the Energy Working Group of the Batyány Society of Professors, and we had already 2 times Professor Samuel Furfari as our lecturer. Second time, we organized a conference, a climate energy conference at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. And my question comes from that conclusion that CO2 is not the cause of climate change, as it was questioned by the other key lecturer, but it is a consequence of the increasing temperature. So why the most important thing for the energy policy would be to question the theoretical basis of the climate policy. I wonder, it is not an extremist view. It had been for a decade, but in this year I think the emperor is naked. You mentioned music, the orchestra. What I would recommend to illustrate the situation is a Hungarian opera for children, The New Clothes of the King. It is from the tale of Andersen, the emperor is naked.
Very good picture, very good symbolism. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Kevin, please.
Yeah, I was just going to respond to that. So, like I was alluding to in the talk, I have a paper, policy memo, available on the Advancing American Freedom website, a policy memo that goes into the scientific case for vacating the endangerment finding in the States, but it applies globally too. Climate models, for example, vastly overpredict temperatures. If you look at the forecast going forward, you could see the trends in hurricanes and tornadoes. They haven't been increasing. They are if you cherry pick the time period. But if you go back to the early 1900s, late 1800s, for hurricanes, you don't see much of a trend. They fluctuate with natural cycles. Same with tornadoes. There is no meaningful uptick. So, and along with precipitation. Carbon dioxide, as you were talking about earlier. Yeah, so there are different opinions on this, on how sensitive the planet is to CO2 emissions. The 0.14 degrees Celsius temperature mitigation level that was simulated using IPCC climate models at the end of the century, if the EU were to completely decarbonize, that is assuming the worst case scenarios about how sensitive the planet is to CO2 emissions. But the evidence indicates that it is much, much less sensitive to CO2 emissions than many people would conceive. And you could see that in the overprediction of the models. CO2 also has benefits. It's literally plant food, right? It's the fundamental component of photosynthesis, leading to longer growing seasons and so forth. So there's so much out there, and I think now the public is beginning to realize that there are two sides to this story, and it is not all, what some people would refer to as doom and gloom hysteria.
Thank you for the question and also for the answer as well. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your interest in our program. So thank you.